Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Corrupting and Crime Daily, the show where I, your host, Rebecca, recap live trials. I'm a mess. I went out and walked the dogs, and the wind was blowing. And anyway, I have a true crime story for you today. Not much going on in trial land that I'm particularly interested in. And to be honest, I've been playing Xbox. But um, we do know that the Murdaugh trial, the financial crimes part of the Murdaugh saga, that's going to play out November 27th in Hampton County with Judge Clifton Newman, all the same players. But this is going to be focused on the financial crimes regarding Gloria Satterfield, the housekeeper. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. That'll be right after Thanksgiving. I know next week is Thanksgiving. What? Where does the time go? So I will get to this true crime story. We're going to cover the story of the ghost train out of New South Wales and Sydney, Australia. And man, oh man, it's a doozy. So I'm working on my gnome, my Thanksgiving gnome. Do you like his sweater? Anyway, working on that. Yeah, my hand still hurts, but do what I can. Um, So let's talk about this ghost train fire. I mean, this was a long time ago. 1979. Do you remember what you were doing in 1979? I had oh my, I'm not gonna tell you how old I was because I date myself, but I had just met the guy that I was gonna marry and have two children with. Of course, we ended up divorcing 18 years later, and the two children are grown and off on their own. That's how long ago it was. I know. So on Saturday, June 9th, 1979, five young men, they were, 12, 11, 12 years old. They all met and were great pals. They went to Waverly College. They call it Waverly College. I don't know why do they call it college if they're only 12? They were like in the eighth grade, seventh, eighth grade. So those boys were Michael Johnson, Jonathan Billings, Seamus Riley, Richard Carroll, and Jason Hallman. They had convinced their parents to let them go by themselves to Luna Park. Now, Luna Park is this huge amusement park that sits on the Sydney Harbor across from the Sydney Opera House. Prime real estate, and that's going to play into how this ends up. And you got to watch to the end because you're not going to believe how this ends. So, these five boys, part of the agreement that they could go to this thing by themselves was that they go up. I think I should put my microphone on the other side. That they go to mass. So they go, and Jason, who lived to tell the story, said he went, but he's not Catholic. And he said for years after he said he took communion, because the other boys took communion, he didn't know what to do, so he went and took communion. So for years he said he he thought God was mad at him because he had taken communion and he wasn't supposed to. Now, why would God be mad at him? Well, that we're going to get to that. So the five boys, they go to mass, they get on a bus after mass, and they go to Luna Park. They're so excited. They go on all the rides. It's got a merry-go-round. It has all these games you can play, bumper cars, and I mean, it's just a huge place. Games, you know, not quite Disney World, but it was fun. So great way to spend an evening. So the end of the night starts, things are winding down and they decide they were going to go on one particular ride. And when they got to it, it was closed. So they turn back, they're headed out of the park and they're like, hey, look, there's still people in line for the ghost train. Let's go over there. We're going to go to the ghost train ride. So the five boys proceed to get into the carriages of the ghost train. It was one of those rides where you get into a little, you wait in line. The guy that's working there, he punches your ticket. Like, remember those old hole punchers? Like, I don't even know if they still make those things. They punch in their ticket and they get in and they go on the ghost train. Two of the boys get on one carriage, two get on another, and Jason gets on the third carriage. And as you're going into this thing, it's pitch black inside of this thing. The only thing that you can see it. There's everything's like fluorescent lighting inside, and between cars, these doors open and shut into in the next section, and it winds around. And about 3/4 of the way, there's this fake fireplace. After you see the fake fireplace, it has this sort of cage where you actually go out into the open where everybody's standing in line to get on the ride, or they're waiting for people that are on the ride. You can wave to your take my picture, I'm on the ride. And then it goes back into the building, and you finish up the ride. I, I'm trying to think of something to compare that to that I've been on at Disney World. And, they call it a roller coaster, but I guess it's a roller coaster. My thing of roller coasters is, and this place had roller coasters, but that it goes up and down. But this one just went, and it not fast, really slow. Meanwhile, that night, a woman named Jenny Godson and her husband, very young parents, really really sweet parents. She got married when she was 17 years old, has 2 children. She's just living the life. They're on vacation, and they decide we're going to go to Luna Park with our 2 children. And the two little boys were young, 7, 8 years old, really cute little boys. And the night is winding down, and they decide. The little boys want to go on the ghost train. We want to go on the ghost train. Well, mom wants to get an ice cream. And she's like, I want to get an ice cream. Well, so they get in line at the ghost train, and mom goes to get her ice cream. Meanwhile, the line goes pretty quickly, and dad and the 2 boys get in a carriage, and mom's still trying to get her ice cream. Um, when she comes back, the ghost train is up in flames. Those the 3 people there, they did not make it out. And 4 of the 5 boys do not make it out of that fire. Jason was rescued by a carnival worker that ran in, grabbed him, because he was the third carriage back. They grabbed him and saved his life. So, to the carnival workers, nothing really seemed out of the ordinary when all these people got on the ride. Several of the witnesses said that as they were going through the ride that night, um, when they got to this fake fireplace, they saw flames. But and one of the witnesses said, "God, it really looked real," but everybody said, "No, no, that's it's a fake fireplace. It's not real." And then they get out of as the fire starts getting more and more real. Some of the people that saw it, they decide they're going to get out when they get to that cage that goes outside. So when they get to that cage, they look up. They can't get out because it's actually completely covered. There's no way to get out. Um, so when they get to the end, they tell the workers, "I think there might be a fire in there," and their workers are like, "No, it's a fake fireplace." Meanwhile, the smoke and flames just proceed to get worse and worse, to the point where people are getting out of their carriages and they are running backwards. And they're running around this building, and some of them get out. uh, As we know, the father and the 2 sons don't get out, and the 4 boys do not get out. They all 7 of them perished in this fire. The carnival workers, they ran in when they realized, hey, this is real. They run in and they're trying to save people, and they saved as many people as they could. One of the carnival workers said he saw the father and the 2 boys crouched down in a corner, and he tried to get to them, but he was overwhelmed by the smoke. So he proceeds to go back out. As soon as he gets out, there is a massive explosion on the train. Meanwhile, the fire is raging, and the carriages are coming out empty because they were running around trying to get out. And, you could hear everybody screaming and running. One of the firefighters that was interviewed said that it was the worst fire that he had ever seen. Um, and there was no water available to pump on this fire, except they finally had to get pump water out of Sydney Harbor to get the fire out. So meanwhile, the whole ride is just demolished. Some of this electrical fire theory really were debunked mainly by the photographs. If you look at the photographs, this electrical fire, at this ghost train, the lights are still on, and the cars were kept coming. The track was still running. The cars kept coming out of the ghost train. Several of the witnesses said that the lights were still, the lights came on. The carnival worker turned the lights on. They came on. So there were several witnesses to this fire that were interviewed. The first of the witnesses was a gentleman by the name of, well, he was 17 years old. He was living at a homeless shelter, if you will, group home. He was brought down to the police station at 2 o'clock in the morning to give an interview about what he saw. So there were a lot of witnesses to this fire because, people had been running around screaming and they're all watching this thing go up in flames. So, I mean, there were a lot of witnesses, a lot of witnesses. The mom that had gone off for ice cream, the ice cream, of course, got ditched, and she is just basically in a state of shock. She doesn't know where her boys are or her husband. You know, she knows that they were in the ghost train, but they never come out. So the first witness was a 17-year-old named Les Dowd. He is brought down to the police station at 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, this fire occurs about 10 o'clock at night. So he's brought down to the police station about 10 o'clock, about 2 o'clock in the morning. And the woman that was the house manager, I guess, she goes down with him because he's a minor. And she just listens while he gives his statement. And he tells the police, I overheard a group of men, 3, 4, 5 men, a couple of girls, and he describes them very meticulously. He said he just has this kind of brain that where he can give very accurate descriptions of things. And the woman said he's not prone to lying. This is not a kid that makes things up and lies, you know. So he tells them, he says, he overheard them say that they were going to spread kerosene on the floor and light it with a match. So after he gives his interview, they go home. At about 5 o'clock in the morning, a be on the lookout, which is what we call it in the U.S., BOLO, but a similar type thing goes out over the radio to the police to look for these guys. He described them as bikies. We say bikers here in the U.S., but same thing. Scruffy looking, long hair. Alcohol, smoking. Uh, so Be on the lookout goes out for those bikers. So he and the house managers, they go home. He goes to bed, and he's barely asleep when he gets woken up by the police. They want a second interview. They take him down. She doesn't go with him. They take him down to the police station for a second interview. During that interview, he claims that he was bullied into changing his statement. He was told that someone would come after him if he didn't change his statement. So, I mean, he's 17. He's scared to death. He changes his statement. So then they charge him with being a public nuisance, and he gets 12 months probation for this. So let's talk about some of the other witnesses. There was a second witness that was also interviewed that night. Her name was Tina Marie Shakeshaft. She corroborated Les Dowd's story. She said, I overheard Les Dowd, he told me that night that he had heard these guys talking about kerosene and matches. She was also brought in for a second interview where she says she was bullied and pressured into changing her statement, but she refused to change her statement. Then there was a third witness. He was one of the carnival workers. His name was Albert Bessel. He claimed that he also corroborated Les Dowd's statement. He said he saw about 9 men, 2 or 3 girls, and they were dressed up like bikies. Then there was a fourth witness, Alan Chappelle. He was the staff superintendent. Now, he had run into these bikies. He describes them as bikies. He said there was a group of them. They were carrying beer, and he had to caution them. You can't have beer in here. So and he gives descriptions, pretty good descriptions of these bikies that he saw. And those descriptions match the descriptions that Les Dowd gave. Then there was a fitness witness, Frank Boitano. He was also a worker, and he saw the bikies outside of the ghost train at the time of the fire. Then there was a sixth witness, Elena Jahaz. She was a passenger when the fire broke out, and she saw the bikers. She was waiting in line, and she saw the bikers get off the ride. These witnesses were told, "We can't prove that the bikers set this fire, so just forget about it." So the funerals happen. They have the funerals of all four boys together in this huge cathedral. There were thousands of people that showed up. There was over 1,000 students from Wesley College that lined the streets as an honor guard as the casket was driven by. Later on, one of the four boys, his mom, they decided they're going to have a memorial for him. And at this memorial, there are a group of girls, and they're off to the side and they're all sobbing, and she doesn't understand why they're sobbing. So it's in the back of her mind. So she goes home, and several days later, she gets a phone call from a young girl, and she says, we were supposed to meet up with the boys at the park that night, and my dad told me that we couldn't go, that something was going down that night. Her dad was a guy named Jack Rooklyn who had ties to organized crime. Now, how did he know something was going down that night? So, about 3 weeks after the fire, they have a coroner's inquest where over 80 witnesses are called. Among those witnesses are the ones that I just described to you. They all show up for this inquest. None of them are called to testify. The results of that inquest, the coroner said, well, we think that a cigarette butt started the fire. Somebody was smoking a cigarette and threw the butt down, and that started the fire. So let's go back to the detective inspector, Doug Knight. He is described by several people as being corrupt. And people were very surprised that this is the guy who was in charge of this police investigation. He's described as a fixer, that he uh, deletes evidence, he alters evidence, he fixes the outcome of court cases, he can sort things out for the right people and the right price, of course. In this case, it appears he erased the entire crime scene. If you look at photographs of the crime scene, there are all these very, very powerful people at this crime scene. Doug Knight is the least of all these people. There is a guy named Bill Allen, who's the police commissioner. He's at the fire. A guy named Jim Black, he's the assistant police commissioner. He's at the fire. So, what is going on here? Well, as it turns out, the property that was this Luna Park was on is an extremely attractive plot of undeveloped land. It's across from the Sydney Opera House, and it is owned by the government. Well, they put out bids. The government put out bids to develop on this property, and there was a company called the Grundy Corporation who had the top bid, and everybody thought, okay, they've got the top bid, they're going to get it. They thought they were going to get it. They didn't get it. At the last minute, it ends up going to a new contender called the Harborside Amusements, that were supposed to maintain the property. And then they built Luna Park. And interestingly enough, after this ghost fire, the Luna Park closes down, and everything in Luna Park is auctioned off. Very valuable stuff, because this is stuff in this park, because it was opened originally like in 1935, I think. So everything's auctioned off. So there's a man by the name of Abraham Saffron. He's known as Mr. Sin. He owns and runs all these um, notorious strip clubs, bars in an area called King's Cross, which is one of those areas where, it's just very seedy. Strippers, prostitutes, this is, you don't want to go there. And he is notorious for paying off the police. Blackmail, extortion, bribery. This guy he's not a nice guy. And he had a series of fires happen at his establishments in the early 80s, including different places. One called the 85 Oxford Street, which was a gay disco. The Peak Nest, which is a ladies only club. The Wonder Center, Fonzie's Fantasyland, the Creole Disco, the Venus Room, 148 Brighton Boulevard, the Anglers Club. Fires, every one of these things, with kerosene. And turns out that Abraham Saffron had an interest in at least 5 of those locations. He was found responsible for some of those fires, but it never went any further than that. So, as it turns out, the owners of Luna Park were his nephew and his cousins. He had installed his own game machines into the park, and the proceeds for those game machines went into a trust that he owned. So, the licensing magistrate, he's looking into this incident at Luna Park, and he said that he was 100% sure that Abe Saffron was behind the fire. The licensing squad had gone out, done an investigation, and they recommended that the police further investigate. A year later, the police indicate that there was no evidence that Abe Saffron had any beneficial ownership in Luna Park. Now, remember I mentioned that girl's dad, Jack Rockland? He was one of Abe Saffron's best friends. Six years after this fire, the National Crime Authority for Sydney, they opened an investigation into the possibility of corruption. Their conclusion was there had been an inadequate police investigation, but there was no evidence that this was due to corruption. Then there were these 3 police officers that actually wiretapped several high-level officials, including a justice who was part of the parliamentary commission regarding investigating this fire. Well, all of the fires. This was just one of the ones he was investigating. He passes away during the investigation, and all of the evidence for this investigation is sealed, and nothing ever gets done with it. The seal is not broken for 30 years. Once it's broken, you can see that the wiretap included a gentleman by the name of Neville Rand, who was the Premier of New South Wales, the highest level official in New South Wales. He was also a good friend of Abe Saffron's. And he happened to be close to that justice who passed away. Apparently, Neville Rand, the Premier, and Lionel Murphy, the justice, together with Abe Saffron, colluded to get Abe Saffron the purchase of that land where Luna Park was built. Meanwhile, the evidence, all of the transcripts of the wiretaps were shredded and the tapes were destroyed. The police, actually, those 3 police officers, because they received death threats, they destroyed those tapes. They barbecued some of them, and then they took some of them and dumped them in the ocean. Now, that National Crime Authority, they never interviewed any of those police officers. They can tell you what they heard, even though all that stuff is destroyed. They were never interviewed. So it looks like this guy, Abe Saffron, this huge mafia crime guy, was behind these fires for financial gain. So that is the story today, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Uh, this is, thank you to Netflix. They did this documentary. I saw it and I thought, wow, I needed to tell you guys about this. I had never heard of it. And meanwhile, seven people lost their lives in this ghost train fire. So I will see you tomorrow in Crafting and Crime Daily. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.